Hello from the United States. I'm Amy Markham, Director of International Admission at Mount Holyoke College, and I'm excited to have a chance to talk to you today about one of my favorite parts of the college counseling process, and that is writing your essay. And I know that students feel pretty nervous about this a lot, but I hope that I can share some tips with you that will be helpful. One thing that's important to keep in mind is that essays are incredibly subjective. So what I tell you may differ from things that you've already heard. It may be new. That's all okay. There's lots of information out there and it can be a little bit overwhelming, but your job in this process is really just to sift through the information that's available, find the commonalities, and then adapt that information to fit who you are and the way you want your essay to unfold. So I wish that I was here with you in person and that we were talking face to face, because I would ask for a show of hands about how you're feeling about your essay. Some of you may be feeling a bit like this and you've got it under control, and that's wonderful. You're happy about your topic and you're well on your way. But I have a feeling there may be some people who are a little bit more in this camp. And my goal today is that when the session is over, those of you who are feeling a little bit more like the student on the right will feel more like the student on the left, at least in terms of your direction and what you should do going from here. What I want to do now, though, is talk a little bit about just the realities of the times that we are living in. So we all know that COVID is it affects all aspects of our lives pretty much these days. And students are experiencing these effects in very similar ways. You've been staying at home, you've been learning online. If you've been back in class at all, it's probably a really altered experience from what you're used to, and that can be pretty jarring. You're away from your friends, there may be stress at home, you may have technology issues, so many different things, and admission officers really recognize that you're dealing with so much right now, and going through the admission process on top of that is just a really big extra burden that you're facing. But when you think about your essay, I would say that COVID-19 may not be the best topic for you to write about. And it's mostly because a lot of you, even though your experience is your own, the nature of what you're experiencing is probably pretty similar to other people. And so if you would be writing an essay that just talked about it being hard to be cut off from your friends and the challenges of technology and online learning, there are so many other people who could write that same essay. But if you feel like you can write it in a way that really shows the reflection and impact of the experience, and perhaps how your thinking has changed as a result of COVID-19 and its influence on you, then it could be a good topic. Fortunately, though, you don't necessarily have to put it in your essay, even if you want to talk to us about how it's affected you. The Common Application this year has created a new option for students because of the uniqueness of these times, and it has given you a number of different ways that you can impact, or you can share with admission officers the way that COVID-19 has influenced you. And if you click any of these boxes, except for the none of them apply to me, you'll be given a space where you can elaborate a little bit on what that impact has been. And so that way you don't have to use up your essay space to talk about this unless you really feel like it's going to be a very strong essay topic for you. And a lot of you will fall into the category of none of these apply to me, because your experience may be very similar to everyone else. And so you're not needing to write about something that's out of the norm. We understand if there's any such thing as a standard COVID-19 experience in terms of just the hardships that people are facing. We do understand that, and that does not necessarily need to be elaborated on unless yours is out of the norm. So now I want to go on to my first official tip. And in some ways, it's kind of related to COVID-19. So if you look at this message, you can see that this admission officer is kind of exasperated because he's about to read yet another essay about how the coronavirus pandemic changed a student's life. And the reason that you see the exasperation in this shared meme is that lots of students will take kind of a story approach to writing their essay. And because teenagers are living similar experiences, the nature of what they write about is often quite similar. So we tend to find a lot of topics that are repetitious, and unless they're treated in a way that really shows how this situation influenced you, the subject matter can get a little more repetitious for an admission officer. But I will say, just in following up on the previous slides and on this particular image, that it doesn't mean that COVID-19 is a bad topic. So maybe you had technology challenges and you had to become incredibly innovative in order to handle your school assignments. And through doing that, maybe you realized that you were good at creating things, or that you were really good at problem solving and working around solutions in ways that you hadn't known that you had those skills before. And if you want to write about that and what it was like to have that kind of awakening, that can be a really great topic. So really, I think the main point here is that how you address the topic is the most important piece. So I always want to encourage students to choose their topic in a way that they can do at least one of these things listed on the screen right here. So each of these things give us insight into who you are, how you think, how you reflect on things, and that shows some deeper insight. And that's something that we're really looking to see on the university level. So what you want to do is focus more on the how and a why than the what. So a lot of times students, I think they're trying to do this, but they don't necessarily know how, and they end up writing what I call a story essay. And so a story essay can be memorable, but it rarely reveals very much about the student because it usually lists a lot of details about an experience that they've had and does very little to share with us why that experience was important to them. So I encourage you to try to pick your topic and make sure that it's something that will allow you to do ideally 2 or more of the things on this list here. And if you can do that, your essay will probably stand out a little bit higher from some others. And I imagine that many of you watching this video are applying to very selective or highly selective universities. And at that level, there are often hair-splitting differences that are made between the student who gets in and the student who doesn't. And so this type of thoughtfulness and insight and self-awareness can show you as somebody who's thinking is going to enrich a classroom and enrich a community. And that's the kind of depth that's characteristic of an intelligent and an engaging person, and that's something that will really enhance a university community. So here's where there are probably a few things in my discussion today where I may say something that differs from what you've heard. I know that a lot of people say you have to immediately catch the reader's attention right off the bat. I don't really agree with that because I feel that that advice forces you to put too much emphasis on trying to be clever and do something sort of innovative right from the beginning. And that just might not be the style of how you write. And so if you start to force it, then a clever opening may not fit with the rest of your essay. I feel that my job as an admission officer is to read your whole essay, whether I like it or I don't. It's part of your application, and I read your whole application. So I'm not a big fan of the have a hook piece of advice. I also think the whole notion of setting a mood or using imagery can be something that is also really not necessary. We want to learn about you and something that matters to you. So if you're not creative, if you don't write with a lot of metaphors and imagery, you don't need to do that. And if you're not somebody who puts humor in your writing, this probably isn't the best way to best time to start doing that, because writing with humor is a skill. If it's something that you normally do, then maybe this is the place to do that. But the bottom line, I would say, is be true to who you are. So moving on from this comes to point 2, which ties in a little bit with actually what we've already talked about in some ways. And that is, how you're addressing your topic. So I am somebody who really likes to see that the person has written something that is directly related to the prompt. It helps me evaluate how well you accomplished your goal. I know some other people who feel like if the essay is nicely written and it veers off track, they're not so worried about that. My feeling is, since you don't know who's going to read your application, that it's always better to kind of play it safe, and it's never wrong to show that you followed the instructions, and it's never wrong to show that you can answer the question that you've been asked to address. Faculty expect you to do that. So that's my piece of advice there. But you also need to keep in mind that human beings are reading your application. It's easy to feel like you hit that submit button and your essay or your application goes off into the cyber universe and you have no idea who's looking at it. But it really is people, and we're not all the same people. Lots of differences exist among us, and we have different personalities, different preferences. And so part of the reason that multiple people will probably read your application is so that we can balance each other out, and we really want to be fair to you in the process. But as you look at this list of ways that some admission officers want one thing and others want another, you may first feel like, oh my gosh, there's so many contradictions here, what do I do? But again, this is where I would say you need to be true to yourself. And you also should just try to relax a little bit, because your application will probably be read by at least 2 people. And we do try to put checks on each other. And if somebody's saying, oh, I don't like that, somebody else will have a different opinion. Nevertheless, as I said just a minute ago, it's really never wrong to play it safe. So if you look at those first 2 bullets, I would say that even though some people don't mind if you stray from the topic, other people don't mind if there's 1 or 2 little grammar mistakes, it's better to just not put yourself in the position of having to be evaluated based on that. So I would try to stay on point, and I would try to get the grammar right. And again, with the imagery, you don't want to let what you're trying to convey get lost amid really beautiful prose, but that are so imagery laden that the reader doesn't really know what you were trying to accomplish. And I'm going to close some shutters here because it was raining when I started this presentation, and now the sun is streaming in. That's a little bit better. So, as I said, this ties in a little bit with what we were talking about in the first tip. So you want to think back to the fact that you're choosing a topic that allows you to do a couple of these things. And these objectives from the first tip are things that will guide you toward a coherent essay if you keep these in mind. And they can also help you figure out which prompt might be the best one for you. The Common Application offers, I believe it's 8 essay topics this year. I just copied a couple of them, and what I want to focus on just right here is the last 3 essay topics. They all have what I call the Part A and the Part B. So Part A is, what is the thing that you're writing about? Part B is, what did it mean? What did you learn? How did you change? What new insight do you have? What perspectives or values have changed for you? That's what you really want to get at. So the first one, I think, is kind of a tougher essay than the others because it's pretty open-ended. And what to me is challenging as a reader about this essay is that students usually write about something that they really love, but I don't know why they chose it. Again, there's no part B really to this. It just says, if you have something about you that you feel we need to know, tell us. But people just tell us what the thing is. They don't tell us why it is that their application would be incomplete if we didn't know that. So if you pick that essay, I would definitely try to work into it something about why that's the thing you picked to tell us. So the next thing along these lines that I want to talk about is a little more about the story essay that I just mentioned a couple of minutes ago. So the story essay is kind of the description essay. It tells about something that happened to you, and it maybe tells it in a very compelling way with a lot of detail, but when an admission officer gets to the end of that essay, they still might not know why you picked it or what you really care about. And I'm going to share an excerpt of an essay that actually was written by the daughter of a friend of mine who was applying for dental school. And I think it shows, it's a really good example of someone who missed an opportunity to say something really compelling that a dental school would want to hear. And instead, she got caught up in the story that kind of answered the question, but gave so many other details that weren't really relevant to the question that I felt she wasted a lot of time and space in what she wrote that she could have used in a stronger way. So the essay prompt was, please explain why you want to pursue a dental career. So here's the essay, and this is a short answer essay. Good morning, Frances, I joyfully sang as I walked a resident I was assisting in the memory care unit of the nursing home I had been training at to become a certified nursing assistant, a CNA. First of all, that's a very long sentence, first sentence. After Frances woke, I led her into the bathroom to assist her with oral hygiene. Before we began, she mentioned that many of the other CNAs were not diligent in brushing her teeth, leaving her with a dirty mouth and bad breath. Acknowledging her grievance, I was determined to provide her with the proper oral care that she deserved. After a thorough session of teeth brushing, flossing, and mouth rinsing, Frances smiled at herself in the mirror. It was evident she felt happier. It was at this moment that I realized that how proper oral care could improve an individual's quality of life. Feeling rewarded by my work, I began assisting many residents with dental hygiene. After some time, I found that residents who once secluded themselves were smiling more. Through this experience, I found that helping people through oral care was very rewarding to me. My involvement in the nursing home setting has confirmed my interest in becoming a dentist, as well as my intention to provide dental care to vulnerable populations. So she does a nice job of telling a story. But if I'm reading applications about who I should admit to become a dentist, I know way more about her relationship with these people in the nursing home than I do about her interest in dentistry. And it does come through that she wants to help people and that this is an interest of hers, but I think she lost some great opportunities here. Not enough time on the why of the dentistry. And so really what's missing in this particular example I gave you leads me to my next tip. And that is you really need to reflect. And I've said this, already in this talk, but you need to reflect on the meaning of whatever you're writing about. So you want to show that growth and the self-awareness and the new perspectives. And in order to do that, you have to be able to think back and reflect, rather than just recounting the facts like we heard in the dental school essay. So most essay prompts want you to reflect on at least one of these things: impact, growth, change in perspective, new insights. So I've been mentioning that all along, and it may be sounding a little, repetitive. Oh dear, I'm going backwards here. Maybe sounding a little bit repetitive to you. But it will, sorry, I'm a little bit thrown off by jumping around on these slides, but so it may be a little bit repetitive, but I'm doing that because I think it's actually really important for you to keep this in mind as you're writing. And it's important to weave these insights throughout your essay. A lot of times what people do is they introduce their essay with a statement like, last year I had an experience that changed my life. And then they go on to describe the experience. But I don't know how it changed your life. That's what I really want to know. How did it change your life? Or the other situation is somebody says that they took a community service trip, or they ran for an election in their school, or they tried out for a role in the play. And usually these stories get told in quite detail and then wrapped up at the end with something like, so even though I didn't win the election, I realized that it's good to put yourself out there, and you should always try, and I'll know how to do better next time, with just like a simple conclusion. And like the dental school essay, that's really a missed opportunity. So you want to show this reflection throughout your essay. This slide I really love because it's kind of entertaining, but it also reflects a number of essays that I read every reading season where students take on too much in their essay. And I know that there's a real temptation to do that because you write your essay for people who are evaluating your application and are going to make decisions about whether you're admitted or not. So there can be a real temptation to put a lot of your accomplishments and your interests in there so that we know everything about you. But really, I find that sometimes less is more. So focusing in more depth on something that matters rather than stuffing a lot of different things into your essay is a lot more compelling. And really, if you have too many things pushed in there, the really good stuff gets lost because you don't have time to develop it fully in ways that will be meaningful to us. And then finding ways to put different things in just sometimes feels really forced and contrived. So focus, have a little bit more of a minimalist approach rather than trying to tell us everything. And this diagram is just kind of another visual representation of the previous one and also the dental school essay. So that student really wanted us to know the setting that she was in and what happened. But the admission officer really was mostly interested in that little slice, wanted to know more about her interest in dentistry more specifically, and there was a little overlapping slice between what that person wanted and what the student wrote. So it's kind of a classic example of missing an opportunity. And again, as I said at the beginning, at the most competitive levels, it's really, it can come down to small things that make a difference. So this is where you want to really put your best foot forward. The last main tip that I want to give you is something that I find there's a real paradox in writing, and that is the more you work on something and revise it and take different approaches and then give it a rest for a couple of days and come back to it, the more you can be confused about whether it's even a good essay at all. And that happens because you're so close to it. You've written it and rewritten it so many times, and you realize that it's a topic it's meaningful to you. It's important, possibly even to your future, but it blinds you a little bit from the reality of its quality and maybe even some mistakes that could be in it that you're not aware of. So with that in mind, I really encourage you to get feedback on your essay. So what you should do is ask a few trusted people in your life to read the essay out loud to you. One reason to do that is that, again, because you're so close to it, if you're reading it yourself, you're anticipating the next word. And you might not notice that there's a word missing, or that a word is in there twice, or that you cut and pasted just slightly incorrectly. And those are things that probably won't keep you out of admission, but you just don't want to have any sort of from the tennis world, unforced errors in your application. And I will tell you that every year we get emails from students who are sending us attachments of revised versions of their essay. And it's because of some little thing like that they realized after they sent it. And actually, it doesn't work that well when they send us a new essay because, first of all, their whole essay is loaded through a system where it's connected pieces of your application, and we can upload an additional document, but the admission officer is still going to see in the flow of the application that came through the upload, they're going to see the original essay anyway. And then later in it, they're going to see, oh, there's an addendum here. But then that's another thing for them to read. Then you've called attention to the error. So you can avoid that by getting some help. The other thing is that you should ask these trusted people to tell you what they think you're trying to convey. And that's important because, again, you're so close to it and you know all the details of your story. So it makes sense to you, but it's possible that for somebody else, there's a piece where they think, I don't really know how you got from here to here. You got to fill me in a little bit there. So they'll be able to point out some of those places where there may be some gaps that would be a problem for a reader who doesn't know you at all. The other thing is that people who know you also might be able to say, this reminds me of the time that you did this or that or said this or that. And they might be able to give you something that you've completely forgotten that might fit perfectly into your essay. So those kinds of suggestions can be really helpful. The last thing that I would say is by asking them if they understand what you're trying to convey. It's this whole notion of making sure that the admission officer gets the point that you wanted. And I think that there's a great tip that actually comes from no less of a brilliant person than Aristotle, who gave a recommendation to speechwriters and speakers that what you want to do is kind of follow a format where you tell people what you're going to tell them. So that would be kind of akin to the introduction. Then you tell them, that's the body. And then you tell them what you told them. And that's the conclusion. So I'm not suggesting that you do something so formulaic as the traditional 5-paragraph essay. But if you think about just making sure that it's clear to your audience what you're trying to convey, that kind of tell them what you're going to tell them, then you tell them what you told them, can help keep you on track. So with that in mind, we're going to recap what I just told you. So remember to choose your topic wisely. I encourage you to make sure that your response really addresses the prompt or the question. You want to focus not so narrowly that it sort of loses any interest, but not so broadly that you're jumping all over the place. You want to reflect on what the meaning of the experience was. And whoops, I just did it again. Sorry about that. Oh dear. And so then, boy, see, I would so love to be doing this in front of you so that we weren't having these issues here. And I think that what I'm experiencing right now is a great example of how we are all coping in different ways and learning new skills that we didn't think that we had before and having to adapt. So that's what I'm trying to do here and stay on track. But you want to reflect some of that insight, and then you just want to verify that you've accomplished what you wanted to accomplish. And if you do that, I'm hoping that you can feel a lot more like this student than the one that we saw at the beginning of the presentation who looked pretty frenzied and out of control. So I hope that this was helpful. I want to remind you that these are my opinions and that there really aren't hard and fast rules in essay writing. There are some good tips and suggestions, but you need to sort through and find the pieces that resonate with you, that you can put together in a way that supports writing an essay that represents who you are and what you want to convey. So I think if you follow that and other pieces of information, that tips that I wasn't able to put in this short presentation, that you will be off to a good start. So I wish you the best of luck, and thank you for watching my presentation and putting up with some of the little hiccups along the way. Thank you.